Critics always hate the films we think are great, but only one appreciates them all. He serves us every day, he keeps the trolls at bay, though he may be a shade delusional. The shelter of his mouth is moist, he will not give you any choice. Agree with him or else, because he is the film defender.
There's only one question you must answer. Who will you stand with?
What are you doing?
It looked a lot cooler in my mind.
Yeah, that's probably where it should have stayed.
Defender, I have so many ideas! Defender, I have ideas like floating Golden Gate bridges and exploding houses!
Okay. We don't have the budget for any of that stuff. I mean, look at the Golden Gate Bridge that we're using. It's made of paper. Welcome to episode 14. Can't believe we've lasted this long. Of the film Defender, serving the public good one underrated movie at a time. Today, I'm coming to the defense of X-Men: The Last Stand. And since this one is such a derided movie, especially amongst fans, I had a feeling it might be tough to get the aggressor on my side for this one.
You know, it's been a really long time since I've seen this movie, and after watching it again, there's just so many flaws that I just cannot ignore.
Well, we'll see how many of those flaws are legitimate.
Defender is always underestimating my powers.
You underestimate my power!
And without further ado, let's get into objection number 1.
This movie is all surface and no substance.
Really, all surface and no substance. So the ethical dilemma of whether or not to take a mutant cure if you're a mutant struggling with your powers, or whether or not to administer a mutant cure to a dangerous mutant who's wreaking havoc on society, isn't an interesting subject to delve into. And it also delves into when and how and where you can use your powers ethically, such as Xavier's decision to try to contain Jean's powers so that she could be more functional and not give in to the overwhelming power that was inside of her that she couldn't control. But at the same time, is that a good thing? Because he's sort of taking away her freedom and subduing her natural gifts and abilities. So I like how it kind of makes us question the motives of somebody who up to this point has seemed pretty philosophically infallible.
Yes, they had these themes throughout the movie,
Yeah.
but it was choppy in the sense that they always had to keep plugging in these like character soapboxes, and they'd get up and do these long speeches to each other. And especially the scene, and we should probably issue a spoiler alert, the scene where Storm is speaking at Xavier's funeral, for instance. That was a moment where I feel like she was extremely heavy-handed.
Yeah, you do have to remember that this is before The Dark Knight really stepped up the game and elevated the level of storytelling that we have seen in a comic book movie. And granted, it's not quite at the sophistication level that X1 and X2 are, but it's carrying on in that same vein that Bryan Singer established with those first two movies. Who was the winner of objection number 1?
Put in the comments below.
And with that, we're on to objection number 2.
They give short shrift to the characters we love. So, Defender, I have beef with how they don't really do justice for some of these characters. Especially with, like, Angel. Angel has zero influence on the outcome of this storyline. He is merely there as, like, an overarching story to eventually save a man that's been thrown off a building at the very end. That's really his only purpose.
His dad.
Dad.
Yeah.
Man, Dad.
His story is sort of a separate arc that doesn't really intersect with all of the main characters in the main plot. He's just a representation of how this whole mutant cure issue is affecting the common mutant. And so it's kind of interesting to see his perspective on that, even if he doesn't really affect the plot directly.
Well, let's move on to another character that I have in mind. Bobby, Iceman. Bobby, bro. You're in an awesome relationship with Rogue, and you screwed it up.
Yeah. And she's way hotter than Ellen Page.
Yeah, why even go flirting around with that?
Yeah, Ellen Page looks like she's 12 years old.
I've got him on my side.
But at the same time, having so much unfulfilled in a relationship like that will definitely wear on you over time. And she started to show a little bit of interest in him, and I can kind of get why he would see that as appealing.
My only issue is that they took some of these characters and, in a way, either didn't do them quite enough justice or kind of dragged them through the mud. It was really disappointing to see Cyclops' character reduced to such a minimal character throughout the movie. To see him get taken out like a little punk, going back to Alkali Lake by his little girlfriend, Jean.
Yeah, I can see why that'd be disappointing for some people, but at the same time, his role has been minimalized in every single X-Men movie, not just this one. And it was nice to see him have some range of emotion compared to the block of wood that he's been in the first two X-Men movies. And even though he doesn't survive much longer, it was at least a change of pace and something that we hadn't seen from that character.
Well, what about Professor Xavier?
What about him?
He goes in with good intentions, trying to save Jean, and they reduced his character to a point where he had no power to even intercede or assist her when he's been able to do it before in the past.
Yeah, but at that point, she was fairly young and inexperienced with her powers, so it would have been a lot easier for him to contain them to some degree. But at this point, the Phoenix has already been unleashed, and she's the most powerful mutant that anybody's ever seen. So it makes sense that he isn't able to overcome that, and he is trying to, but that just fuels her anger because she doesn't want to be controlled. And we've seen throughout the first part of this movie that he's actually got a pretty interesting motivation and conflict as he's struggling to convey his decision to try to contain Jean's powers rather than what he's naturally inclined to do, which is to help her grow and progress in her mutant abilities. So who is the winner of objection number 2?
Vote in the comments below.
And with that, let's go on to objection number 3.
How could Magneto turn on Raven so quickly after she turns human? They're basically soulmates.
I actually like how this character arc shows Magneto's ruthlessness and his mercilessness and his dedication to his cause, that he's willing to sacrifice anybody to achieve his goals. Nobody's as important as his mission, and we see that in a kind of heartbreaking and hard to watch way.
After all the history that we've seen with them together, though, especially through X-Men 2 and all the times that she's gone out of her way to save him, especially retroactively looking at first class, X-Men First Class, after all that history, it's hard to just ignore or cast aside someone like chaff in the wind, or a dirtied garment that you no longer need.
Interesting.
It's hard for me to imagine that, because they're basically soulmates.
I don't know if I'd say anybody is a soulmate with Magneto. I mean, if we're going to use future movies as part of our defense, look at what happens in Days of Future Past. Once he realizes that killing Mystique would solve their problem and not just preventing her from killing Oliver Trask, he quickly decides to just go along with Xavier so that he can betray her at the proper moment. He's a ruthless guy. He's not a good guy. He's a villain. And we see that throughout this movie, but especially in this moment. So who do you think was the winner of objection number 3?
Vote in the comments below.
Objection number 4.
There are simply too many logical inconsistencies. So they're flying into Alkali Lake, and there's this thick fog over the lake, and they land, and they're walking, and Wolverine says something like, "Man, it sure is foggy," and Storm says, "Oh, I can do something about that," but it takes them like 5-10 minutes to figure out that they can do something about that. That didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it probably would have been a good idea for Storm to get rid of the fog before they tried landing on the surface. But from a filmmaking perspective, I get that they want to save the dramatic reveal for us to see the fog lift and for everything to be kind of supernatural around and for them to not really know what's going on.
Another one that I can't help but think of is the second time that they meet at Jean's house. And Xavier and Magneto, they both kind of casually walk into her house, and before Magneto walks in, he says to Juggernaut, "No one comes in." And what's the first thing Juggernaut does? He throws Wolverine through the front window.
In Juggernaut's defense, he does go into the house and then prevent Wolverine from getting any closer to Magneto at that point. if that helps. He's not very bright. I think we've seen in the movie that he's not very well known for his intellect. He's more of a brute. And I think that comes across very clearly in that scene especially.
There's also the child, that his power is to reduce the effect of other mutants around him. Why couldn't they just put him in front of Jean Grey instead of just killing her?
Yeah, that is sort of a missed opportunity. But at the same time, they just went through all of this struggle to try to save the little boy, so they probably don't want to take advantage of his powers right off the bat like the government was doing. I don't think that's something that Xavier would have been very cool with.
Okay, so how about when they bring that boy back to the school and they're trying to teach those kids how to control their powers, but they have a kid who can take away the powers of everyone around him? And what are they going to teach him? Like, what are you supposed to teach a kid like that? Like, how can you control that power?
Xavier's school is not just a place where they can teach them to use their powers more effectively, but also a haven for people with special gifts where they can go and learn practical things as well, that they will be away from the judging and small-minded eyes of the humans who might be trying to oppress people with special abilities or people with differences. Who do you think is the winner of objection number 4?
Put in the comments below.
And with that, let's move on to objection number 5.
They have ruined the Phoenix Saga. So, in the comics, Jean Grey's transformation into the Dark Phoenix is actually like a cosmic event. She had so much power, and she was so strong that she had the ability to destroy an entire solar system. And she had more power, in a sense, than Galactus did. It was kind of like a philosophical and moral dilemma that the X-Men had to face.
The only problem is, with this being the third of a trilogy, it would be a huge leap to suddenly take this into space and make it a cosmic adventure. With the foundation of the previous 2 movies that Bryan Singer set up that are solely earthbound and that are interconnected with the social issues that a lot of people are facing with the metaphor of X-Men, it wouldn't really work to suddenly take that and, expand it out into a galactic tale. So, with the Phoenix story that we had set up in the second X-Men movie, this is a logical progression, and it's sort of a different take, but one that stays true to the heart of what happened in the Phoenix Saga. We see her basically vaporize hundreds of soldiers, a bunch of mutants, and demolish an entire island. I think for the scale that this movie is telling its story, that is enough. And that's by far more power than we've seen any other X-Men exude up to this point. And that gives legitimacy to her Class 5 ranking. Who do you think is the winner of objection number 5?
Put in the comments below.
And now it's time for our closing arguments.
Overall, I feel like this was a mess of a comic book movie. First off, they really did a terrible job at the Phoenix Saga. This movie really had no substance to it. It was just kind of an action movie that we all got to see. It was a popcorn summer movie. They give very short shrift to a lot of the characters that we know and love, and there were just too many logical inconsistencies for me.
And for me, I felt like they dealt with the Phoenix Saga in a very appropriate way considering the lead up to this film. There are a lot of thematic elements that tend to be overlooked despite the fact that some people say that they're so present that they're heavy-handed. It's a bit of an inconsistency there. X-Men has always been an ensemble movie, and they're focusing on different characters in this film, so I don't think that the fact that they give less time to the original characters is necessarily a bad thing if the replacements are fairly good, which I think they are. And the logical inconsistencies, that's something that exists in any comic book or action movie whatsoever. X-Men The Last Stand's updated status.
Wait, time out here just a second. I thought the audience was supposed to decide this.
Yeah, you're right. So who do you think won the debate? Post in the comments below with either hashtag Defender
or hashtag Aggressor.
And don't forget to leave your thoughts on X-Men The Last Stand in the comments below as well. Also, is there a movie that you love that deserves a strong defense? You can either email us, tweet us, post in the comments section below, or check out the Facebook page. And as always, we truly appreciate your support for our channel. And don't forget to subscribe by clicking the flashing subscribe text so that you don't miss any of our future defenses. Thanks again for watching, we hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, the defense rests.
And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one.
Okay. So try to maybe...
This isn't gonna work, dude.
What are you doing?
I don't know. What am I supposed to say? Oh no.
Motion sensor lights.
What, are they off for good?
They turned them off. I can turn them back on. But... Oh no, they're back on. Here we go. We were just too still. And we got all that on tape. What are you doing?
I thought it would look a lot cooler in my head.
And there's a jet right now, so you wouldn't be able to hear my...
Ideas like floating San Francisco bridges.
Well, we'll see how many of those flaws are legitimate. Knowing this guy, he's probably bringing a lot of bias into that argument.
And you're not bringing bias, Defender?
I'm never biased.
This movie's as deep as a pothole in Idaho street. You know what I just am realizing?
What?
I can't see the top of your head.
Oh yeah, it blends right in, huh? I have the top of a head. Don't worry.
I'm looking at it, it like disappeared in the light.
I know.
Look at
Whoosh.
it. Defender, I would actually disagree with that. I would disagree because it actually has moments where there's characters getting on soapboxes and giving long speeches about personal held beliefs on matters of such things as thusly.
Very well said.
They give short shrift.
That's something that Xavier would have been very cool with.
That's why he's the Defender. And I get told what to do when I'm addressing.
Or being able to have that contact. So,
I had a good... Sorry, I just had a thought that you can use. Did I get you at a bad time? Were you in the middle of something?
I wasn't doing anything.
Getting punked by his girlfriend.
By his girlfriend.
Babe. To see him get taken out like a little punk, going back to Alkali Lake by his little girlfriend, Jean.
His little girlfriend.
His little girlfriend, Jean.
It was relatable to see a broken down and emotionally broken down.
What?
Didn't this bug you?
It did, but like after you put it that way, I'm like, yeah, I get it.
So who do you think was the winner of objection number 3?
What happened?
Oh, great. You got it.
Hello?
Is there anybody out there? And as always, we really appreciate your... Why is this so hard? This is something I say on every video. You'd think I'd know how to say it without flubbing it.